Some of us spend our time playing new releases, or whatever games are in the charts. I, on the other hand, prefer the finer things in life. A great game is like fine wine and gets better with age. But like a fine wine, sometimes these commodities hold significant value. You may not be able to afford thousands of classic games, but I certainly can. So I am here to educate you and share with you my experiences with some of the best games of all time. Who remembers Rayman? Well, the answer is probably everyone, since it is a Ubisoft franchise that has received sequel after sequel to this day. The franchise originally caught my attention when I played the PS1 version of the original game when it first came out. I took an instant like to this game. It appeared to have bright colourful graphics and a decent soundtrack, and most notably of all, it appeared to be a complete rip-off of one of my favourite childhood side-scrollers, Plok. Up until this day, I can say I have played through all the 2D Rayman games, and I can say, although these games are decent, they are just Tesco value knockoffs compared to the source material in which the game mechanics are stolen from. Plok's originality is identical to that of his French wannabe impersonator Rayman. Both Rayman and Plok's feet and arms are detached and are able to move independently from their bodies. This allows both characters to launch long-range attacks at their enemies via shooting their limbs off at them. I first discovered this gem when I was a small child. For some reason I had this Super Mario All-Stars videotape. This was a promotional VHS tape from Nintendo that featured tips, tricks and reviews on existing games on the Super Nintendo. The tape was presented by Craig Charles from what appeared to be a futuristic looking spaceship. Looking back, this VHS must have been quite influential upon one's young self, because apart from learning completely useless factoids like who Nigel Mansell was, I must have also been inspired to watch Red Dwarf, after witnessing Nintendo's deliberate nod to it in the form of the spaceship and Craig Charles. As a child, I remember watching this tape and already owning quite a few games featured within it. But there were two games I didn't own that immediately jumped out at me upon seeing them. The first was The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, and the second was Plok. Eventually, I managed to convince my mother to buy me both of these great titles, and I was thoroughly delighted with both choices. However, within popular culture, only one of these games went on to receive godlike status, and it obviously isn't Plok. Plok, just like myself, is an unsung British hero. Playing the game is firmly etched in my mind as being one of my favourite childhood pastimes, alongside other stuff I loved in that period, such as the Power Rangers, Premier League sticker albums and Pogs. I remember one Friday evening being so engrossed in the game that I just wanted to keep playing, trying to get further and further, but sadly I had to turn the SNES off in order to go to my primary school disco. Ridiculously, I have clearer memories of that night getting ready and playing Plok than I do of the actual school disco itself. However, to be honest, it was probably just used up swapping Premier League stickers and gambling Pogs. So now, after giving you some nostalgic rambling, let me tell you a little more about the game itself. The manual describes Plok similarly to the way I would personally describe myself. It describes Plok as a true hero, a man on a mission with a heart of gold. He is suave and elegant. He is a grade A, first class, prime cut. Also, a bit like myself and Saddam Hussein, Plok is a massive fan of his own face, so therefore he keeps a special flag on top of his house with a picture of himself on it. The manual says he does this so he can see it every day when he wakes up, and again when he returns home at night after a hard day of, well, being Plok. If you were a despicable character and wanted to upset poor Plok, the simple solution would be to steal his flag, and that is exactly what someone has done in this game. Of course, this flag burglary makes Plok hopping mad, so the game starts out with Plok on a quest to regain his flag. Firstly, one of the great things about this game, which makes it unlike other platformers, is the sheer volume and amount of variety. The majority of platformers feature the same gameplay style all the way through, and just get progressively harder by adding trickier platforming. Plok differs from this formula by constantly changing up its game. You start your adventure with simple short lives on Cotton Island. Each of these levels is completed by traversing from left to right and reaching the flagpole at the end of each level. This section of the game operates much in the same way as a traditional Mario or Sonic game plays. At the end of this section, you reach your first boss level, in which you face off against some large enemies, in which you must attack and eventually kill by bringing down their life meters. There are interesting varied boss battles throughout the game as you progress. After getting off of Cotton Island and returning to Plok's homeland known as Acrylic, you find that the country has now been populated by pesky fleas. This is the main girth of the game. The levels throughout this section appear to be the longest and take up the most amount of playtime. In order to complete these levels, Plok must find and defeat every flea throughout the levels in order to progress. Although this may sound like it could possibly be annoying, it is far from the case, because all of the fleas can be found easily as long as you traverse all of the level. None of the fleas throughout the game are hidden in cryptic places and can all be exterminated at your own leisure. It is endless fun obliterating each flea, as it is a satisfying experience hearing them make a squish noise, and it is a sensory pleasure seeing the flea tally at the bottom of the screen go down each time you destroy one. After a couple of levels on Acrylic, Plok takes a nap and you get to enjoy another variation in gameplay. You now get to play as Grandpappy Plok once again in traditional left to right side-scrolling levels. The change up this time is the game now plays in sepia and looks like an old-fashioned silent movie. The difference between Plok and his grandfather is that his grandfather has a dashing moustache. Ah, moustaches. So stylish, so sophisticated. Myself and Grandpappy Plok both have great moustaches, and my very own grandfather was no different. He was a great man, you see, and his legacy and influence have affected me right up until this day. You see, because of that great man, I have gone on to inherit all of his factories in India, which he had built during the days of the British Empire. He was such a kind and thoughtful man. He gave all the poor people of India jobs. And if it wasn't for people like me and my family, then all those poor children in India would be unemployed. And you wouldn't simply be able to go to Primark and pick up a t-shirt for £3. You see, by me paying each of them £2 a month, they can afford food and clean water. So everyone's a winner. You even get to wear Tesco value jeans. Anyway, enough of me talking about my great contributions towards humanity. Let us talk more about Plok. At the end of the Grandpappy Plok section of Legacy Island, you finish up with another boss battle, although this time it is slightly more difficult. When Plok awakens, you return to hunting fleas on Acrylic. As you make your way through these levels, the game has plenty of variation in terms of music, theme and level design to keep you interested. Throughout the rest of this section of the game, you face off against a number of different bosses. Again, like the levels themselves, each boss in this section is different and requires slightly different methods in order to overcome and defeat. Something that I have failed to mention so far, just like in Super Mario World, there are a number of different power-ups in which Plok can find and use. These power-ups are found within wrapped up presents and give you added powers for a limited time. These power-ups include the amazingly named Ploky, which massively increases your punch range, Vigilante Plok, which equips you with a flamethrower, Cowboy Plok, which gives you a comedically dreadful gun, Rocket Plok, which lets you shoot from all angles, and last but not least, and my personal favourite, the extremely British Squire Plok. And with this amazing fox hunting power up, the manual says, Plok can be the lord of all of which he surveys. Anyone who digresses with him will soon find a pound of bucket shot heading in their direction. Yeah. So after making your way through all the flea exterminating levels and defeating all the bosses, you eventually descend down into the flea pit. Again, This section once again changes up the gameplay style of the game massively, as you're presented with different vehicular power-ups at the beginning of each stage. This includes riding unicycles, off-road trucks, jetpacks, motorbikes, helicopters, tanks and UFOs. The amount of variation this game offers is simply amazing. As expected, this final section of the game is by far the most difficult. It includes some very tricky platforming, tough vicious enemies and quick deaths. And then another factor that makes this section so hard is you obviously have to master handling a completely different vehicle with every single level you play. This section used to always end me as a child. I could never beat this game. Eventually though, one day as a full grown man, I said to myself, you know what, I really love Plok, and after all these years I rather ought to finish this game. So I sat myself down and after a few solid playthroughs I did in fact beat the game. And such a satisfying feeling it was. There is nothing better than beating back your childhood demons. I recommend it to all. The final boss battle pits you against the Queen Flea, who you must beat using a flea exterminating power up. After this fight, the credits finally roll and you watch Plok fall asleep in his chair. Before I move on, I would just like to touch on how fantastic the music in this game is. A game that is celebrated today for its fantastic soundtrack is Secret of Mana. However, Plok is another game in which the soundtrack is simply sublime. But sadly, like everything else in this game, it never gets the true praise it deserves. Every track is unique sounding and fits the mood and tone of each level. The whole bloody soundtrack sounds so unique and nothing of like which you have heard in any other game. Sadly, after this adventure, we never got to see Plok in another game ever again. When he fell asleep in that chair, it was his final gaming resting place. Plok should have been a star, but sadly, when he entered the Great Mascot War of 1993, he never received a second outing. This was due to a slew of terrible platformers such as Bugsy that tarnished that particular genre of gaming. Recently, I jokingly tweeted the original creators of Plok demanding they give me a Plok 2, and they informed me that Plok once again lives, but this time in the form of a comic book they have created. They informed me that if they managed to sell 1 million comics, they would then have the money to be able to release Plok 2. So using this information, I took it upon myself to buy 4 comics. So now I know the Pickfords only have to sell 999,996 comics before they can give us a Plok 2. Yeah! Now personally, apart from Steve Pickford's tongue-in-cheek sales pitch, I firstly bought the comics out of my extreme love for the game, and secondly out of my love for collecting obscure gaming merchandise. What could I possibly ask for that is more obscure and novelty than a set of Plok comics? Anyway, I would never usually have any interest in owning or reading a comic book. After all, they are for pencil neck nerds. I have no interest in children's characters like Dennis the Menace, Wolverine or Deadpool. However, with these comics, they featured a more adult orientated character, Plok. So I took it upon myself to read every single inch of this literature. And to be honest, I was pleasantly surprised. I was genuinely entertained. The humour was very dry and very British, and just up my street. Reading it gave me further flashbacks to the days Plok was in its prime, and I was also a regular weekly reader of the Beano. So my final thought of the day is you all need to play Plok, and you can get a bloody copy on eBay for as cheap as £4. That is criminally cheap for a SNES game in this day and age, and I do not understand why every collector under the sun isn't clamouring to get this gem. Further to this, why not try the comic books? They're a fun read and really unique pieces of gaming memorabilia. And obviously, the more people that get behind this, the more chance we have of one day receiving a Plok 2. I will post a link in the description where you can order copies of these comics. We may never receive another Plok game, but one thing is always guaranteed, and that is I will always Plok continue to enjoy this game until I finally fall asleep in my chair. Cheerio. If you enjoyed today's video, then I strongly urge you to subscribe to this channel, as I've been uploading weekly reviews for months now, and I have no intention to change that. If you would like to learn a little bit about a rare Atari game, hit my Red Sea Crossing annotation. Want to reminisce about how great Secret of Mana was? Then hit the Mana annotation. Or if you would like to learn about the Sega Saturn, hit the Saturn annotation. If you are interested in purchasing a Plok comic from the Pickford brothers, then I have a link for you in the video description and at the bottom of this screen now. Ta-ta and farewell.